I wish good things to you who's watching this. I am Alexey and I have some good news to share today because I got a silver medal at the 2023 Mind Sports Olympiad Grand Prix in Azul. For those of you who don't know, the Mind Sports Olympiad is like the Olympic Games but for board games. And the Mind Sports Olympiad Grand Prix is like the Olympic Games but for online board games. It lasted for 2 months, featuring over 100 different tournaments, one of which was in Azul, and that's the tournament I will be walking you through today. With around 120 participants, including some of the biggest names in the game, I would call it the most important event in online Azul of the year. I will be walking you through my entire tournament journey. Hopefully we'll learn something about Azul in the process, or you'll just find the story interesting. Just before we start, the tournament format consisted of 10 games, 7 games in the preliminary stage, and 3 playoff games. In order to qualify for the playoffs, you needed to win at least 6 out of 7 preliminary round games, so there was not a lot of room for mistakes. I will not analyze every game in detail, but I will show you the first and the last game in its entirety, and I will show at least a couple of key moments from all the games in between. And the first game over here, we're playing not just anybody. First of all, we're playing an Azul Master, which is an unlucky tournament draw for both of us. So rating-wise, I was the #1 seed in the tournament, and my opponent, with the screen name Haka3, was, by the way, not just any master. That's the Polish player Kajetan Vogt, who recently won another important Azul tournament. He won the Ms. Dong Invitational, where most Azul masters on Board Game Arena were playing. So they were the 4th seed in the tournament. So basically the playoffs essentially are starting now for both of us. And unfortunately, they're also the starting players, so I'm going to need to work really hard this game. They start with 2 whites, which I rather like, and they're forcing my hand because they are about to complete the 4th row. I have to take 2 whites too. Of course, I'm not going to place them in my 4th row because my opponent will likely be taking the first player tile, so we want to oppose them on a different column, and they do indeed take the 2 reds for the 2nd row, get the first player tile, and I actually needed the reds for my bottom row, so that works out. I start taking the blues away from them, and they're probably going to be taking the blacks. Oh no, they don't. I would have taken the blacks if I were them, but okay. So they take the 1 white, essentially forcing my hand. I take the 1 whites as well, completing my 3rd row. Then they have 3 blues neatly aligned for their 3rd row. Now I take the 2 blacks for my 4th row because we both I needed the blacks for my 4th row, my opponent needed the blacks for my 5th row. Then we exchange natural moves for our top row. Of course, I take the 1 blue in order not to lose the points in the floor line. And here comes an interesting game. So a beginner would definitely place the 3 golds as my opponent in the bottom row. Most players who are not beginners, at least intermediate to advanced players, and I think many masters, would just discard them because the 3 golds do not align into the column. However, at the highest level, I think my opponent should have gambled and tried to take the 3 golds for the bottom row, because you see they're discarding the 3 golds because they do not align with the column. However, they are losing 3 points because of that, and also they have the first player tile. So if they manage to complete the golds early, they manage not to lose the 3 points from the floor line. And then there are all kinds of good things that can happen for them. Maybe later in the game they can pivot to another column, or threaten a 2nd column, or threaten a complete color. There are some interesting things that can happen when you have a 5th row completed early, but their move is definitely legit, and it's very rare that you should actually put a mismatching color in your bottom row. So they go for this sacrifice, and I think I'm doing all right. So I'm only losing one productively placed tile. I have the slightly better adjacency here. By the way, when I'm talking about productively placed tiles, so look at that. I had 1, 2, 3. My opponent has 1, 2, 3. I have 2 here. My opponent has 3 here. So they have more stuff on their board, but I have 4 more points. It's, not to be discounted. And it's a great run out for them. They take the 3 blacks, which I needed and they need for their bottom row. And now I think many of you would have taken the 3 reds because I need them for my bottom row. However, I tried to something fancy here because the idea is my opponent only needs one group of free reds for their third row. They cannot use the reds elsewhere, so I can delay that. And I decide instead to contest them for the blacks because they needed the blacks. I needed the blacks. They decide to take the first player tile with the third row immediately. Then I go on my second row because if I don't do that now, then I will end up losing my second row in all likelihood. Then they also, they take the whites first. Then I think I took the blacks, just to complete my stuff, and then we exchanged natural moves, so they have to take the gold for the second row. I have to do the same in order to force their hand, and they do the same again. And here, again, many players, first of all, would just complete 1 point in their third row with the reds, or just take the reds and put them in the bottom row. But we're in no hurry. Our opponent doesn't need the reds. So first of all, we're going to take the black for the top row because the black would be just so good for them. And now they need to choose between the white and the blue. But instead, they decide to first discard the red so that I don't take them at the expense of 5 points, which is, not nothing. And then I get to have 2 blues and they get to have 1 white at the top, which is somewhat disjointed from the rest of the action, but it's something. And now if we look at the situation, there are 6 reds in play, 3 discarded, so there are 11 reds remaining. And for me to complete my column, I need 5 reds, but actually I really need 8 because I need 5 in my bottom row and 2 in my second row and 1 in my first row eventually. So I need 8 out of 11 reds, which makes it actually not very likely that I will be able to complete my column. But who says you have to complete a column? It's only because it's the most common win condition, but that's not how you always win the game of Azul. And that's why I wanted to show you this game in its entirety, because it doesn't really happen very often. I probably only had this type of game once or twice against another master. So I've sort of revealed what's going to happen, but let's just go through the game. So they take the 2 blacks, which they need. Then, very natural move, very tempting, just grab the 1 blue for the third row with the first player tile. No. You see, with this run out, which is pretty good for them, we have to play defensively. They could use their golds, the yellows, very well in their third row, so we have to clean them off first. And even though on our fourth row they are going to give us only 1 point for the yellows, it's not as bad as losing 5 points to my opponent, placing them on their third row. My opponent grabs the first player tile again, and now they also play defensively. They take the reds for the fourth row, which made me a bit worried because if I give them too many reds, not only do I lose the column, they might end up with complete color, but I believe if I just take a couple of reds, myself, I can neutralize the threat of complete color eventually. So I take the 1 gold. Then I think they took 1 more red, which they have to. Now it forces me to take... no, yeah. I took the 1 blue, so that I have 2 possibilities, actually 3 possibilities still for my second row. It's essential that I fill my first and second row this round. I believe here they took the 1 gold for the top row because that's something that I needed as well. Then I ended up taking the whites for my top row in order to force my opponent's hand and also force some tiles into their floor line. So first of all, I'm threatening to take the reds for my second row, so they have to take the reds now. And then obviously I have to take the blacks for my second row as well, and they do end up with some nice adjacency. But at least they lose 2 points in the floor line with the 1 blue. And there's not a lot that we could have done about this because we just didn't have anywhere where we could have placed the blue. So it does feel like I got away with this from this round with minimum damage. A lot of adjacency bonuses over here. And in this round, also very few reds. At this point, I have completely given up any hope at completing the column, and I will be just trying to win differently with adjacency bonuses. So they started with 1 black, then I took 1 red for my top row. Oh yeah, the idea is I just want to have the first player tile in my last round, so I'll be taking pretty much anything that's suitable for me. And now here, I think they should be taking whites. Like they could either take 1 white for their third row and then try to complete their third row like this, or they could take 2 whites straight away, or they could take 2 whites for the second row, because we both need whites in so many places. But they took 1 red, and I believe that was their main mistake of the game. Because you see, the point is, you want to disrupt your opponent's columns, but if you try too hard, then you are doing so at too great a cost to yourself. Because the thing is, like, a column is worth 12 points, essentially, in this position especially, because I get 5 points for filling in my bottom row, plus 7 points for the column. But I can get these 12 points elsewhere, and also you have to remember that my opponent discarded some reds, and also they will be blocking their bottom row now. And since I'm having the first player tile, I will be able to have a sufficient number of reds for my second row, which I will eventually need to finish the game. So I do believe the whites were a priority here. I was very happy to see this move. Then I essentially decided to force everything, grab some whites, and now also threaten 3 blacks. So my opponent kind of has to... I think they had to take 3 blacks. So did I? Yeah, but then I ended up taking 3 blacks instead, and this is just, well, it's really strong adjacency bonus, because now I'm threatening the 3 whites as well. They have to take them for the second row, I believe. Now, of course, there's a little bit of a problem, because let's say if I take the 1 white, I give my opponent the 3 golds, which they need to score 6 points on the third row. Or, you know, they can take the 4 blues for the fourth row, and then I'm left with the gold myself. So the best move that I could found is this. However, maybe an even better move, which was kind of bold, but I sort of chickened out on that, is to do the same, but simply place it on my bottom row because of what's going to happen next. So my opponent is threatening their 4th row. I end up, of course, not giving him that. And then they cannot afford to have 3 rows blocked in the last round. And if anything, having 2 rows blocked in the last round, it's already can already be a bit problematic. So they drop the tile, and I am not going to drop these tiles. I have all rows free, and there's a sufficient number of golds to make these two golds play. So I decided to put these two golds in my bottom row and preserve the 4 points. And here, of course, is just the main thing that I need to do is grab the reds, simply finish off the game, and with my 9 points advantage, I should be fine even without a column, because a column is worth 7 points. So essentially in this position, I'm at +2, and I will have slightly more adjacency bonuses. My opponent finishes the game. Now I take not another red just yet, because I need to finish my top row before all the golds converge, and also I make sure that the blues converge as well for my opponent. And the blacks as well. So they probably take the 2 blacks. I force them into taking the first player tile, which of course has no value in the last round, because there is not going to be a next round where they could take advantage of that first player tile. I take 1 red and also create another threat of putting 4 whites in my 4th row, so they have to react somehow. And the thing that they did here, no, I don't think they did that. They probably changed their mind. Yeah, but the thing, if they take the 4 whites now, then I take the 1 red, and they end up with 4 yellows in the floor line. So that's what they saw. So that's why they decided to take this first. And now they create a situation where they could use both the whites and the golds in their third row. But of course, I'm going to force their hands. I see that the golds are slightly more valuable for them, and also they're quite valuable for me. So I get to, yeah, I'm pretty sure they did that after some deliberation. I get the 4 yellows on my 3rd row. They're forced to do the whites. I take the blues, and they discard 2 blacks into the floor line. So this was a very unusual game, but you see they do end up having a column. I end up having 0 columns. We have the same number of rows, but just all these adjacency bonuses on the 3rd row, as well as some tiles that my opponent had in the floor line, ended up compensating for the loss of a column. You know that this is a Carcassonne channel, and I like to think of Azul columns as Carcassonne fields. This is usually the main feature of the game. It gives you a lot of points, and typically in order to win a Carcassonne game, you need to at least tie the main field. But sometimes, again, I've talked about this a lot on my streams, there are these fieldless win conditions where you just score a lot of points for cities, roads, monasteries really aggressively, and then you end up not having to need the field. And in Azul, there's pretty much the same thing. There's something that's I call a columnless win condition, where if your column is disrupted, you can try to win the game in another way, especially as it was in this case, I think, if your opponent tries a bit too hard disrupting you. Something that can happen is, like, if you're playing against an opponent who is trying to disrupt your column, it's a really thin line, but at some point, if they're doing it really a lot, then you just gotta let them. Because if you try resisting them, then probably what you end up doing is like having, I don't know, 4 reds over here in your last round instead of 5, and then, you know, you just lose. It's the equivalent of, in Carcassonne, dropping a 0-point farmer in order to try to fight for the field, and then you get blocked, and then you lose the game by a couple of points. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting one. I felt quite excited about this game because I had a very tough opponent and ended up winning. But, you know, still 6 more games to go and the preliminary stage. But the second game, unfortunately, is not any easier because I'm playing the player with the screen name Sorry I'm Like This, who, as you see, also has a really decent rating. That happens to be Sam from the YouTube channel No Wonders, which is not just Azul, but like a strategy video channel for a lot of different board games. And in fact, Sam is the author of the most viewed strategy guide video on YouTube. Overall, very much recommend his channel. So yeah, like not an easy opponent. But I get the starting player tile, and I start with the blues in the 4th row. Again, a bit unconventional because I think many players here would put the blues in the 3rd row. However, I saw some ideas there. You see, if I place my blues in the 3rd row, my opponent immediately can take the yellows, which I need for the 2nd row, and my opponent can put the yellows in their 3rd row. So my middle column is actually not going to be all that great. I mean, you could play like this, but given an abundance of blues, I can finish my 4th row and at least threaten to finish the 3rd row with the yellows, which sort of match the column. And the thing about the bottom row, you could probably say that there's too small a number of whites, but actually it plays in our favor. Had there been 3 whites, I would not have done that. But with 2 whites, this means that my opponent cannot complete any row with the whites other than row 1 or 2. But for row 1, it's like right there in the corner, and for row 2, it's also in the corner. So actually, these tiles are not going to be valuable for them, and in no likelihood, I will end up with them in my bottom row. So let's see what happens now. Probably as my opponent, that's a good question actually, what I would do. I think a good move here is taking the 2 yellows. So they decided to take the 1 red, I think, and take the starting player tile. It's an okay move, but I don't think it's the best move in this position. So, okay, flashback. If you've seen some of my previous Azul videos, you've seen me talk about the importance of the first player tile and how you kind of gotta take it at a high frequency. However, since I made that video, I gained like 150 rating points, and now I know better. So now, as I'm recording this, I'm rated 862, which is the 3rd highest rated account on Board Game Arena and the 2nd highest rated person on Board Game Arena, because, well, the 1st and 2nd place are the same people, the same person. But anyway, and now actually I know a bit better, because yes, the first player tile is still good for you unless you can get an immediate benefit. And in the first round, very often taking a larger tile group is just more advantageous. But it's okay. You can still play like this. And the thing is, they are opposing me on a different column though. And when they did that, I assumed they want me to take 2 blues, then they take the 2 yellows for the 2nd row, and then they still actually have 3 blues, which can converge for them to finish their 3rd row. So I thought that was actually a neat idea. I proceed with my plan. I take the 2 blues, then they take the 2 golds and put them in the 3rd row, to my delight. So I think that was their opening mistake that gave me the advantage. I was super happy to see this move. I thought, okay, now we can actually play this. So here I had like a bit of an advantage of having watched videos of the No Wonders channel before. I knew that sometimes my opponent tends to value a lot like completing full rows during a single round, especially during the first round, as opposed to what I value, which is putting a lot of tiles where they belong in the right places, regardless of whether you finish the row in the first round or not. So for example, at this moment where I would look that I have 4 tiles and they have 3. So like that's a sort of a slight advantage. But also the other thing is the yellows, they are in a place which is like doesn't fully match. Now I decided to take the reds because they needed the reds for the 2nd row. Here, I'm not sure what they did. Oh yes, they took the 1 gold, sort of proceeding with their plan. And here I was able to just force my opponent's hand, because by taking the 2 blacks, I forced them into taking the 3 blues, because if they don't, then I put them in my 3rd row and then they just lose the game instantly. Because they already occupied their 3rd row with the golds, they go for the less optimal move. Of course, they have to place the blues underneath, kind of proceeding with the column. But still, it's not as powerful as finishing the 2nd row with the yellows and the 3rd row with the blues. And here's was the final bit of my plan. Remember I told you I would end up with the whites on my bottom row, and I did. Now they're forced to take the blacks, which is like close enough. It's like it will give them adjacency bonuses later. And now the greedy move. I get the single yellow, which I did not discard, but I put it here because it belongs to my column. And if you look at the first round, I'd say I have quite a healthy advantage here, because we have both completed 3 rows, except my rows, they all align along the column, and I have 1 more tile. I have, 10 tiles, and my opponent has 9 tiles completed. I mean, they do have the first player advantage. Let's see what the run out for the next round is. Yeah, so for example, they are able to clear off their 4th row. I probably take some golds and so on, and the game continues. But I thought that I had a healthy advantage like this, but actually they did manage to find ways how to almost equalize, and fast forward to the 4th round, here we are. So I am 2 points ahead, but my opponent somehow completed the column before me, even though I started out with more whites. And as you see I have this like red square and black square here. Because of some not quite lucky runouts, I had to play defensively, so I just had to take away tiles from my opponent, and I had to place them in such a way that doesn't lose me points. And here we have an abundance of whites, which is not great for us because our opponent needs the whites, and so do we, but they go first. Of course they do this, and here's the problem. Ideally, before the last round, we would want to take the first player tile, but it's no way we're doing them with this 1 red, and we need the whites just as our opponent does. So we have to take the whites, and they quite wisely now take the first player tile for the last round. I want to finish my 2nd row with the whites. It looks a bit weird, but it had to do with the number of whites remaining. Actually, you can see, well, if we're completing on the same column, obviously that's already 10 whites like there. Some were discarded, and then there are whites here, so it's not like I'm going to have a lot of option to use the whites later on. Now here, I managed to make a standard tactic, leaving an odd number of opponents before my move. I have 2 options for the first row. Oh yeah, and I have also 2 options for my 3rd row, so that's actually ended up working really nicely for me. So maybe instead of taking these 2 yellows, even though they were suitable for my opponent, possibly they could have been a bit more patient and then tried to make the 2 whites converge, so that I'm forced to discard 1 white and then they take the 2 yellows. Because there were situations that if I were to block them, if I were to take the 2 yellows from them, then they could have ended up taking something away from me. But I mean, it's a natural move. It makes sense because the yellows do belong there. The problem with that move is that it allows a tactic like this, but it was actually quite hard to see. And they're just now forcing my hand. If they take the blacks, I have to take the other tile group of 3. Also, we don't want to give them a 2nd column, which was absolutely live at that point. Now, if they... here comes the mistake that I think cost them the game. It is a decent position for them, actually, because they are going to have the first player tile. But just given the number of blues remaining, they should have... Also, I think they should have just discarded the 1 white. Or if they're going to take the 1 blue, just discard the 2 blues. Because, well, even if they do manage to complete their row at the bottom, it's not like it's going to give them a lot of points, and they have 2 rows blocked before the last round, and this usually means casualties in the floor line, unless the tiles are like neatly aligned and you had like meticulous calculation. So I'm very happy to finish my first row with the whites, just because I know that the whites are going to be so hard to get in the last round. And we're going to have a look at the last round as well. So I have +4 over here, but my opponent is the first to move. And the first thing that I see is all these yellows that are going to end up in my opponent's floor line. And that's basically like my plan for this round, is at some point I could make them converge. If I have to, I'm going to use them for my bottom row or for my fourth row. And actually, if my opponent is not careful enough, I could even complete the second column. So we'll see that in a second. They take the 2 whites. They finish the game. And here I have to take the 1 blue, because otherwise my opponents will make them converge and I get to lose points. So I decided to go here because I knew there would be a sufficient number of blacks. They, of course, very wisely tried to make the blacks converge, and I was actually threatening to make the whites converge for them. So I here had a decision. It's kind of like super tempting to grab the 3 blacks and put them in the 3rd row and threatening a column, because the idea is that on that first column I would be unopposed. Like, it's not that my opponent's going to take the golds or something, and if they do, they're going to cost them a lot of points. But the problem is, I know that they are a definitely more than strong enough player to find the move of simply dropping the 2, not the 5, but just the 2 yellows into the floor line and disrupting my column. So I just decided to go the simpler route, because I knew that I should be winning this if my opponent drops a lot of tiles in the floor line. I'm not sure what they did here. Maybe the 3 reds. Yeah, the 3 red makes sense. That a lot of points. And here, of course, we get to play the standard tactic, the one which leaves our opponent with an odd number of moves, and they will be the one who have to take the 5 yellows. And I'm not going to put them in the bottom row. It's not like I'm very keen on these 2 points. I'm very keen on my opponent losing a bunch of points over here. So here they, of course, complete their blacks, ends up with 4 more points. I take a blue away from them. They drop a white in order to take away from me. Of course, here I do not take the reds. I do take the reds to lose 2 points, but they end up losing 10 more points. And that floor line ended up costing them the game. So actually, out of this opening disadvantage, the slight opening disadvantage that they had, they managed to make a really strong comeback, especially with all these whites in round 4, but probably just blocking their last row like this with the 2 blues, maybe getting a little bit greedy in order trying to save their 3 points. They ended up having no room for the yellows, and I ended up winning the game by 2 points. Only by 2 points, actually, so it was super close. Because the reason why it's only 2 points, yes, they lost a lot on the floor line, but look at these squares that they had extra that gave him a lot of nice adjacency bonuses, whereas my extra squares, they just looked so disjointed from the rest. They were just a necessity in order to prevent my opponent from getting these valuable colors, and in order to prevent myself from losing points on the floor line. And you will actually see me use the 4th row defensively a lot in this tournament. But luckily, we won this game by 2 points. We're 2 for 2, and we're moving on to the 3rd game. In the 3rd game, I'm going to show you only the start and the end. I'm playing a newer player with a screen name Sunny BB, so you can tell that by looking at their rating, and it's a really good run out for us. We just take the 3 whites and we're chilling. They are there's everything, like reds for our bottom, blues for our second, and 4 blacks for our 4th row. Our opponent takes, I think, the 2 blues, yeah, as they should. Then I take probably the 2 reds, because they belong in my column and it's the first player tile. Now they take the 2 blues away from me because I could use them in my 2nd row. Then I just take the 2 blacks for my 4th. My opponent needs them as well. So far, kind of natural moves. But you see, I have a bit of an advantage because of these 3 whites. My opponent takes 1 blue. Yeah, so far so good. Here, I decided to take the 1 gold from the top because they needed the gold. And I'm not worried about my second row. If you ever find it like hard to calculate, you see, there are no groups of 2 tiles, but there are 3 disjointed pairs of 2 tiles each of matching colors. And when that happens, you can know that you're actually guaranteed to have at least something for your first row. If there are only 2 matching pairs, then your opponent can actually just disrupt them one by one. But with 3 matching pairs, there will not be enough moves. My opponent probably takes a black. And then I decided to take a black myself to have this extra tile. And you see, I can use either of these tiles for my first row. They're pretty much good enough. Of course, they take the whites because that's what's suitable for them. I have to take the reds, which is 2 columns away. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine. It's still the second row somehow. And in this position, I still have the advantage because I end up with 11 tiles and my opponent has 8. And also I have the first play around, and I have the 3rd, 4th, 5th matching row. And yeah, it should be a good position. So they now should be discarding this blue, but they end up making quite a typical beginner mistake. I did that a lot in that, like, my first 2 games in Azul. So it looks like you are just saving yourself a point and not putting it in the floor line. However, there are several reasons not to do this. First of all, it doesn't match your column. If there are a lot of blacks in the next round, which would be the dream run out for my opponents, well, you know, they have now nowhere to put the blacks. Second reason, I have the first player tile, and I will be obviously taking away the blues from them, especially when I need the blues for my 3rd and for my second row. That will be quite amazing. So you can have a look how the tiles transfer just so that you see. And the third reason is actually blue was the most frequent element because there were already 6 blues, so there are 14 remaining. So there were more blues in the first round in the run out than of anything else, which means that it's literally the least likely color to come up in big quantities in the next round. So there were like all these red flags. And just to show you how you play against a situation like this, essentially you just take away that color and you take the first player tile pretty much every round as far as you can. And then, you know, once in a while you add something to your bottom row, and probably by round 5 or by round 4, you end up completing your 1 column. So of course here I end up taking the 2 blues. My opponents could use the 2 golds for their second row. And here I take the 1 remaining blue again because it fits in my first row. And then again, I'll have the upper hand and the first round. So fast forward to round 5, here we are. I am actually -4 on the scoreboard, even though I have a completed column. So technically I'm not at -4. Well, -4 plus 7, I'm at +3. And I still have the first player tile, and my opponent still has only 1 blue in their bottom row. So here I could do a bunch of different things. I think, because we're competing on the same stuff in our outer row, I just end up finishing the game. And that's basically it. Because I end up making the whites converge for them, which they probably, oh no, they end up not taking them. I think I decided to do the standard tactic again, leaving them with 5, with an odd number of turns. And also I took away the blacks from their second row, so they probably now have to take the whites. Yes, I believe so, just to finish their first row somehow. Probably I should be taking the 1 gold for my third row. Yes, and I have no intention of using the reds for my 4th row, because that would give me 6 points, whereas them putting the reds in the floor line would lose them at least 9 points, and actually probably 10. So they end up completing the bottom row, but which now gives them only 1 point. I take the 1 black and complete my opponent's floor line. So yeah, so that's just to show you how you play against a mismatching tile in your opponent's bottom row. But so far so good. We are on 3-4-3, and we're moving to game number 4. I'm playing against the player with the screen name Lukama VSP. Also, by the way, so the preliminary round, it was all in Swiss format, so which means that in every round you're playing against a player who has the same number of victories as you, so it's supposed to get progressively harder and harder. Like, I won my first 3 games, this person also won their first 3 games. And they start with the reds for their 4th column, and now I'm instantly relieved because this is definitely a mistake. Not only are they starting with an outer column, which halves their probabilities for the rest of the game, because they only have one side from where they can accrue adjacency bonuses. But they aren't even going to complete the 4th row because I'm immediately going to oppose them. I decided to go for the column 4 because I have the whites for the bottom and they really don't need the whites. They can take a couple of golds, but they probably cannot take all the golds, and then there's still the blues, which they don't really need again, because in their column the blue is like at the top. So I could end up with a lot of blues here. They do end up taking the 2 whites for their 2nd row, which makes perfect sense, but this gives me the sweet, sweet gold for my 3rd row and away from my opponent's bottom row. And now they take 1 gold again, and here of course we're not going to take the gold from here so that the 3 blues don't converge, and we're not going to take the gold from here so that the 3 blacks don't converge. So we're going to first take the 1 black from my top row and disrupt my opponent's 3rd row where they need the blacks, and now they take the 1 gold for the bottom, which is actually quite neat because yes, they will end up having with the 3 blues in the 3rd row, but it's actually away from the column that they're trying to build. And here, the tiles that we have remaining actually allows us to pivot. So what I do here is I take the 2 blacks for the bottom. They take the only tile that doesn't let them lose points. And I end up with the middle column. So it's actually a super neat setup as well, having like semi-adjacent, like this sort of zigzaggy thing. We have the first 3 rows in one column and the second 2 rows in another column. Because when in the next round, or in one of the future rounds, we get the middle column, the one that matches our bottom 2 rows, we will also get all the adjacency bonuses from this side as well. And also, most importantly, we're closer to the middle, and we have 10 tiles. Well, they actually also have 10 tiles as well, but mine is just in a much better location. So I would say that this is a advantage close to being decisive. It just shows you the importance of the opening again. Let's just see the run out. But also, the idea here is that even though they have the first player tile, I already have more points, and anything that is useful for them, it's actually also useful for me as well. So if I ever want to disrupt them, I don't know, they need the blues, I can put the blues in my 3rd row. They need the blacks. Well, actually, they're probably going to take away some blacks for me. But yeah, so I was able to continue accumulating this advantage. Well, actually, interestingly, here we don't manage to finish the 4th row because they take away the whites away from me, but we do manage to get a lot of blacks over here. Alrighty, but fast forward to the last round. Here we are, where I ended up building and expanding upon my advantage. And as you see, I'm 14 points ahead. However, My opponent has the starting tile, so they take the 2 whites away from me wisely. Now, it is a bit of a problem here because I do want to finish the game, but also I do not want to lose, right? There's a world in which they finish the first 2 rows and I don't. Okay, they can only finish 1 row, but like they can use 2 blues and score more points than I do. So the way to do this, I was deliberating here. First of all, I thought, okay, maybe I can just take the blues later and then simply complete another column. If I take the golds, then, well, they might have to fight me for the golds. But then actually I end up losing them and probably the blues converge and I end up to have to finish the game and like drop a lot in the floor line. So the idea here is I don't want to reveal my threat too early, because with this round there's a triple threat. There are 5 golds, so I could put 4 in my column. There's also 5 blues, so I could get complete color on the blues. And there's also 4 blacks, so I could get complete color on the blacks. So all I need to do is try to make these somehow converge and create 2 threats at once. So my main goal will be to complete my first row, my second row. Because if I get 1 white, put it here, my opponent just takes second white and that's it. So let's see what happens. I take, oh no, yeah, I thought about gold, but then I thought better of it. Thought about it again, but then I thought better of it. Yeah, I just decided to finish the game probably. Yeah, and then just start to draw tiles into the middle. And here comes my threat, basically, so it's actually quite simple. So they took away 1 black from me, so I have no longer a complete color threat from the blacks. So okay, I make a complete color threat from the blues. So now they're forced to take the blues or the whites. Of course, the blues are more important because that's the more serious threats, and also they don't need the whites, they need the blues more. They take this, but by creating this double threat, I made the whites converge. I get to finish my second row as well, and then I get to have an advantage in this round. And of course, the standard tactic at the end, leaving an odd number of tiles at my opponent move, during my opponent's move, so they're bound to lose some more in the floor line. And I ended up winning plus 15 this game, so I was quite happy with this, as it was another example of just getting an advantage from the opening and playing against an outer column already. But so far things were working out great. We were at 4 out of 4. However, round 5 we have another tough opponent. We're playing against none other than Maciej Brzeski, who is the, I don't even remember how many times, but like multiple times winner of not just individual disciplines in the Olympiad, but the overall mind sports Olympiad, like across all games. And actually, he was the one who won the meta event, so he has like the highest cumulative score. I'm not sure how it's counted across all, not all, but like the most important tournaments at this Olympiad. And also in Azul, as you see, they are quite high rated. They're actually my second highest rated opponent to date. And also they have a great run out for them. They probably going to take the 3 whites. They could go for the middle row. They could go for the bottom row. Actually, I quite like the bottom row here for the whites. Yeah, so they can build the 4th column. Then they can get something in their 4th row, something in their 3rd row, the golds. They're going to be guaranteed the reds for the 2nd. They go for the middle, which is completely legit, you know, 2nd column. That makes sense. Now here, I talked about like overvaluing the 1st player tile, but here it's just too neat because I get to take this yellow, put it in my third row, and then I'm guaranteed to take one of these two groups, and then I'm guaranteed to take one of these two reds. So it's actually super neat for me. And here, to my greatest relief, I think my opponent makes a mistake. I was so happy to see this. Because first of all, it's again like an outer column thing. And maybe they can, so probably they should have just put that in the bottom row really if you want to use the reds, because these two blacks are going to eventually converge. Then they can just give away the golds to me, or at some point threaten their fourth row with two golds. I think they could have just proceeded with the plan of going on that second column, or they could have taken the two blues even, so there were a lot of good options. But here, I mean, of course I'm not going to let them finish the fourth row, so they have a bit of a mismatch here. And here they continue with the bottom column. Not yet. Yeah, so they thought better of it, I think, because obviously then they're just giving me too many yellows, that they decided to go for the adjacency bonuses here. I went for my middle row, they went for the bottom column, and now they're revealing their plans that they are, in fact, going to go for the outer column. I do the standard tactic, but also I want to take one gold away from them, and they drop a white, and I get some blues, and they finish their top row. Now we can evaluate this position. So the one metric in which I am behind is the number of productively placed tiles. They do have two more tiles for the bottom row. However, the gold were quite frequent. There were 7 gold in this round, which makes it a bit less likely that they are going to get the gold somewhere. And they also lose a couple of points in their floor line. I also have better adjacency here in the middle, and I have the first player tile. So I would say that I have the long-term advantage here for sure. One of the reasons, okay, we're going to just look at this so that I can clearly show you I can use any tiles that they use. Okay, if I want to take away golds from my opponent, I can put them on my second row. If I want to take reds away from my opponent, reds go in my third row. If I want to take away what my opponent needs, whites. Oh, I need whites for my bottom row. And what else do they need? They need blacks. Yeah, perfect. I need blacks for my second row. So anything that there is like a small number of in any run out, I can make my opponent not suffer, but well, make the life difficult for them. Let's see what happens here at the start. Yeah, so they too take the reds, and here I end up taking the golds away from them on my second row, just as I told you. And then they're like, the whites work out fine for them, but they lose a little bit of points in the floor line. I end up taking away the blacks, so it sort of works out. But we are going to fast forward. Actually, we're not going to fast forward. Just want to show you one small thing. So here, what do? Like, you probably complete your top row with the red or something. But no. This is where the greed comes in. Here, I take a single white and put it in my bottom row. But this is actually... Oh, first of all, you advised against putting a single tile in your bottom row. No, I didn't. Only if it's mismatching. But like, I'm gonna need the whites there anyway, and both the blues and the reds work out perfectly for my top row. And also, I probably know that I'm gonna end up with the red anyway, because my opponent can use the blues. They just want to avoid losing points in the floor line. But also, this is great for me because they're temporarily disrupting the column. So if there is an abundance of blacks next round, I will be doing very well. But now we are going to fast forward to round 4, and here we are at a 10 points advantage. But there's a problem. The runout's not that great because we don't have enough blacks and whites for our second row. So essentially we probably are going to end up without it. And also our opponent takes the first player tile for the final round. We get to complete our column at the very least. And now they get some useful tiles for the second row. Here, I think I was trying to just make different tiles converge and also to create threats. I threaten completing my fourth row, so they're sort of forced to go here. Now the idea is that I also threaten again. I decided that was just pure calculation, so it's not like a positional principle or anything. I think I did this. Yeah, I drop a single red, so it sort of forces them to take a black because there's a sizable number of blacks remaining, and now there are 3 tile groups remaining. So I drop another one in the floor, and I will end up with a little bit of adjacency, and they end up with more in their floor line. And here we are in the last round. I am at +8, but my opponent has a lot of blacks available to them, and they need the blacks. So I would just start with that and go ahead and try to complete at least one column, possibly 2. However, they first decide to finish the game with the 1 white, and I think that was quite a hefty mistake, just simply because what happens next. I take the 1 black and make the gold converge for them. So not only do I make it so that they're forced to take the first player tile and discard 2 more gold, so that will cost them, at least 4 points, right? But I'm also creating a threat of putting the 4 golds on my 4th row, which means that they have to do it right now and not a moment later, which means that I get to be the first on the blacks, and so we just end up doing. Yeah, I also want to take these blacks so that the whites end up converging. They, of course, have to complete at least 1 column, and they choose the outer column wisely. Here, again, it's a forcing move. I take the blacks. They are forced to take the blacks, and now I have the whites for me, which I take away from them and just get some nice 4 points. They drop something in their floor line, and then surprisingly, like complete clean floor line for me in the last round, and I believe I ended up winning this game around +10 or so. So even though there was this difficulty in the 4th round with the colors, I think it all came down to that starting with the outer column and the disadvantages that it brings. So yes, as you see, my opponent managed to build up very efficiently, kind of getting themselves some nice adjacency bonuses, but this outer column disadvantage ended up securing me the win. So far, so good. I'm at 5 out of 5. 1 more win, and I qualify for the playoffs. And this brings us to our next game. I am playing against Paco Garcia with a screen name Palmera. As you see, the only other 800 plus in this tournament. They were the 2nd seeds starting. So this definitely is going to be a tough one. I'm the starting player, which is great. And here I decided to start with the bottom row because there's a number of blacks, and basically the setup I'm going for, you see there are no sufficient whites for my 3rd row. I'm going for 2nd column with a substitute 3rd row. There's something which I call substitute setups, which ends up being stronger than you might think typically. It's not the only possible starting move, but I figured that would be working out. And they found good opposition, so that's a strong move that they found. They found that it's okay to give me the 3 blacks, which of course I'm going to put in the 4th, not the 3rd row. Then here, I'm not going to take the blacks just yet because I need the 2nd row. And they are also not going to take the blacks because they don't need them. They have this for the 3rd, and now sort of these are, I think, quite standard forcing moves. I have my top, they have this, I have my 4th row completed. They're probably going to take the blues. However, it's a sequencing thing. If I were them, I might have considered taking the white first, because now I am taking the white. and they just simply discarding the red. I did not want to take the red because then they would be able to place the white productively in their fifth row because it matches their column. But I mean, their sequencing is perfectly fine because in some scenarios I just take away the blues from them and simply build it on a mismatching column because I can afford that with the starting round. The second round is nice. Well, I need the whites for my third row, but there are like a bit too many whites, and it's really a big problem because now I have to utilize my fourth row defensively, and I think as a result of that I get into a bit of a disadvantage. Yeah, they take the golds. Maybe I could have prevented that somehow, because as you will see at the end of this round, they do have some nice adjacency bonuses. So I managed to converge the blues for them. I managed to defend all the whites, like really a lot of whites, you know, to use the fourth row as my defensive row. But these adjacency bonuses are really, really neat. So I do end up trailing behind in this game. Fast forward to the last round, and here we are. We're trailing by 4 points. We are actually 1 tile behind on our first row. However, we have a lot of blacks, which we have to use. We have some good use for the blacks. So we need to decide how do we proceed with this. So we can either build the bottom column or just simply go for adjacency bonuses and put the blacks in the third row. And I opted for the latter, but I think I may have missed a sequence here. So let's say if I threaten my bottom column, I take the 3 blacks, then my opponent is forced to take the 2 blacks as well. Then maybe I take the 1 black from my bottom column, threatening to complete it. My opponent's taking the remaining black. Then I take the 2 whites because that's what my opponent needs, and I get to finish my second row. So maybe that was the sequence that I could have gone for. However, it probably would not have been enough because I wouldn't have gotten any points for the blacks, and my opponent would still be able to equalize the points I get from my second row from the first row that he could get with blues. Another option I could have gone for, and I genuinely thought about it, is maybe something like taking a white from my second row and threatening to complete it. Then my opponent would be forced to take another white, but then still, just because of the way these blacks are aligned, there's no way how I can arrange them neatly into my bottom column. Especially considering that my opponent is threatening the same column with the blacks as well. So I just decided that it still was not going to work, and I just went for maximum adjacency bonuses, grabbing the 3 blacks, hoping to compensate for their bottom row, for the missing top row. They now do the threats, forcing me to take the whites, and then of course if I do that, they will take these 2 blues, and they will make all the 4 blacks converge in the center while I need the blacks for the top. So I decided to do something else. I decided to let them finish their row, but to get some compensation in return. So I take this black and put them for 7 points in my top row. And actually at this stage, things start looking not so bad because I'm at -4, but hey, this is what, +6, I'm at +2, then I got 7 more, so I'm at like +9. And if they get this white, it actually will be +9 for them, so we're going to be equal, but I'm going to still have a move. And my idea was, if they take a white, then maybe I can take the 3 golds and then converge all these 4 blues and make it so that they're forced to discard a lot of blues and take the first player tile to finish their first row. And this would be forcing because with 4 blues, I'm threatening to score 8 points in my fourth row. However, here they found a really strong move that won them the game. I believe there were other ways to win the game, because in some scenarios I do end up with the blacks in my floor line. In some scenarios I end up with reds in my floor line. But here they thought for about, I think for full 3 minutes, and they found this move. They just decided to simply take a blue. And that's it. That move wins them the game, because now they have completed their top row without all these dropped blues. And now the threat is actually pretty severe of them completing their second row. There is no way I can afford that. Now the second row would give them not 5, but 8, 10 more points. We can't give our opponent 10 points, so we're forced to take this. But what does that mean? There's an even number of tile groups, which means that I'm going to end up with something in the floor line. My opponent takes the 5 golds, which give them the valuable 3 points. And now there's just not much I can do. I take the only thing that does not lose me points, but they take this. And then here go the reds on my floor. And as you will see, it matters a lot, because my opponent wins the game with 1 point. So it did seem to me that in the final round the game was already lost. I tried to create some threats, but at the end of the day they did find some precision over here. One thing that I had glossed over was the threat was actually me getting the 5 points over here with the golds. The same golds that went for the fourth row could have gone into my fifth row. But yeah, so unfortunately it's a loss. So I'm now on 5 out of 6, which means that in round 7 it's a must-win situation. And unfortunately, out of all players that I get paired up with, I'm paired up with one of the strongest players, the Portuguese young talent Guilherme Neves, with the screen name Glovier, who also happens to be a subscriber to my channel, so this means that he knows all my tricks, which is, not great. Here, my opponent starts with the reds, and also great. It's the starting move for them, so it's even another more advantage. Here, it's actually justifiable because they get to complete the fourth row, because there are a lot of reds. You could put that in the bottom as well. So I decided to force the sequence. Now I get to oppose them on the bottom row. And I think this is something that maybe they should have tried instead, because to use the outer column as the starting sequence is fine. As an opposing sequence is nearly impossible. But now I get to use the second column as an opposing sequence. And you'll see what will happen in the first round. They complete their thing. I get the tiley thingy for the starting player, and I get my fourth row guaranteed. They take the blues away from me because I needed them, and now I just do the standard tactic, even though maybe there were some other ways to get an advantage, but I didn't see them, which is why I deliberated, but I figured that was really the only way how I get something good. Yeah, so they now proceed with a plan for going with the bottom column. Yeah, not sure how I feel about that, but at least here it's a more favorable situation. They get more tiles in. I take the red away from them because that would be suitable for the top row. They take the blacks for the middle. I take the blues for my second row, and I'm just a happy person. So now let's assess this position. I have 9 tiles actually, and they have 11, so they have an advantage here. But I have the first player tile. My tiles are quite neatly arranged in a column. I mean, so are theirs, except for the first row, which I have closer than they. But because it's an outer column, I would still consider it a slight advantage for myself. So far so good. And I take away the golds from them. This will end up being quite a close game, actually, because they managed to build their columns very efficiently. But I'm gonna forward to round 4, and here we are in round 4, where I have a 5 points advantage, but my opponent has already completed their bottom row, and they've managed to be quite efficient with their adjacency bonuses in the top part and also in the 3rd and 4th row. And also this runouts does not look great, because look at how many whites there are and look at how many whites we need, just 1. So that's not great. However, I wanted to show you the 4th round because I think that's the one where I managed to find my move of the tournament, which essentially allowed me to progress further. So we're forced to relinquish the starting player tile for the last round. And now some natural moves follow. We take the blacks because we need them, and they take the whites before they converge. And now we also get to force our hand. So we take the, I think, whites, with the idea of them taking the whites and me then taking the 1 blue, so that the 4 blacks converge, and we create a double threat of completing our 3rd row with either the 4 blacks or the 3 blues. So which is why Guillermo now recognizes this wisely and decides to sacrifice his 3rd row just to complete his 4th row. Then here I decided that I'm not gonna let my opponent complete her row. I better sacrifice the 3 points so that my opponent doesn't get the 6 points over here. Well, actually it's way more than that, because they would be getting the extra points for the blacks as well. So when the row that they're trying to complete is in the middle sort of a column, whether it's like row 3, 4, or 2, it's quite important to disrupt. So for example, it's actually more important to disrupt row 3 than it is row 4, because now for row 4 they're getting only 2 points. For row 3 they would get at least 4 points and 6 points if the black is here as well. Now, so you see we're threatening to put the 3 blues into my middle row, and they are not having it. They're putting it in their bottom row, and this is where I think I found my move of the tournament. A natural move, which I think many players would make here, is just take the single blue and drop it in the floor line, with this logic that, okay, your opponent has nowhere to place, so they're forced to discard 2 tiles for 3 points. And then we have 2 free rows, and the 2 golds can go into my 4th row, and the 2 blacks can go into my 3rd row. So then I would be sort of like winning a couple of points here. However, this would not be true. You see how many blacks there are: 4, 4, 1, 1, 2, 2. There are not too many blacks remaining, and it's essential that I keep my 3rd row open. Because what's going to happen if I drop the 1 white at the bottom? They're not going to drop the 2 blacks. They're going to be smart and drop the 2 golds and leave me with the blacks. And I do not want to be placing blacks here because of the low number of blacks remaining. So instead, I take this gold and do not dump it, but place it into my 4th row. Because I know that in the 4th row, it's not like I'm going to be using it for anything else. A lot of reds have already been used up, and I'm going to need the 2 reds at the top. I could potentially use the reds over here, even though this is really for blues and golds, the 3rd row. And also, I save valuable 2 points. And now, my opponent needs to choose between discarding more tiles for both of us or discarding fewer tiles for both of us. So here they could either take the gold and I would discard the white, the blue, and they would discard the 2 blacks, or as they did in the game, they take the blue, and then I get the 2nd gold, and as a result, not only do I get to preserve points, this row is actually playing. So here's what happened in the final round runout. So Glovier here, with an even score on the scoreboard, and essentially a pre-completed column, has a decision to make. So they could either take the one white, or they could take the two reds away from me, just drop them, which actually would not be a good move, or they could just simply finish the game with two blacks, because I need the blacks for my third row as well. I could use the blacks very well there. So they take the two blacks, and now I have a decision. I kind of want to disrupt my opponent's middle row, but if I take the whites, I get to lose my second row, which is much more important. So I just take the reds. Yeah, this is what will happen. I take the reds. My opponent will take the one white, of course, before it's too late, because it gives them 6 points, but they do get to lose the 1 point from the starting player tile, which of course is useless in the last round of the game. And here I took the two yellows to get 4 points. Remember that previous round move? Now it actually plays. And also there are several reasons for this move. First of all, just to get the points. Second, to make the blues converge, because my opponent needs the blues more than I do. And third, to make sure that the golds do not converge too early, because I have additional rows to threaten the golds. I'm threatening 4 points with the gold in my third row, or when all of them converge, I'm threatening 5 points in my bottom row. And now I think at this point, after this, no matter what my opponent does, the game is won for me. So they're actually deliberating really hard which blues to take, but whatever they take, I'm gonna have a winning sequence. Of course, I take the one blue. I make sure now that if they use the blues for the bottom row, then they're forced to discard, and in a closed game like this, every floor point matters. Also, I'm threatening a lot of stuff, like with my yellows, I'm threatening to take 2 points, or take what? Yeah, or take 2 points here, or take 2 points here, doesn't matter. More importantly, with the blues, I'm threatening to take 6 points in the middle row, and they just can't have that. But the problem is all these discarded tiles, potentially. Now, my opponent finds the only move that loses them the least amount of points. Yeah, they first of all do this, but then they think better and actually do this, because they will be only losing 3 points from the reds. Of course, I take the reds because I have room in my bottom row for the golds. They discard the reds, and I score 2 points at the bottom with the golds, which is not just dumping tiles there, it is actually scoring, because as you will see, I won the game by 1 point, and it was definitely my hardest win of the tournament. You see, even though they started with an outer column, they actually, they're very strong players, so they managed to build up things very efficiently. So they had their third and fourth row completed here for a lot of adjacency bonuses. Possibly it's something that I could have prevented. I didn't think so, given the runouts in the fourth round with a lot of whites. But look at what happened there. I was kind of forced a lot throughout the game to use my fourth row defensively. Again, a common theme in this tournament, that I ended up with like this little thing protruding. Like a bit of an unusual shape to have completed. Also, this fourth row ended up giving me 1, 2, 3, 4, so 10 points eventually, which made a lot of difference. But really the move that won me the game was this one single gold placed in the fourth round. And I was quite happy with this find, because now means that I'm on 6 out of 7 and we've qualified for the playoffs. So only 3 games standing between me and a potential gold medal, which brings us to the first game. of the playoffs. And here I'm playing against the player with the screen name Markelle Green, who I think is Rafael Tse, a strong imperfect information player in general, but I may be mistaken here, so do correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not always like very good at matching the screen name to the person, but I do believe it is them. And they start. I think they're making a mistake here on their first move. So first of all, the idea of them building the second column is actually pretty good. You see lots of blacks for the fourth row, lots of reds, so it all looks great. But the problem with that is still in your first move you want to grab one of the larger tile groups, despite the neat idea of, you know, there being two groups of whites available for them to finish the third row. I have a sequence in mind to equalize. And here we're going for another substitute setup. So see what I mean. I grab, of course... not of course, so I start with blacks. Okay, yeah, that's also doable. Yeah, I forgot that I did this. And the idea is, because they occupied their third row, now the three blues are not as valuable for them. And also, I'm threatening to take the three blues myself. So they take the three blues, and this is what I had calculated. Now I take the two whites. I'm threatening my fourth row, so they have to take the two whites, and now I get the three reds for my third row. And even though it's not like it's a dream or anything, but I am taking away a lot of bottom row tiles from them, and essentially I'm playing what I call a substitute setup. I'm playing the middle column with a substitute for the third row. Here, now the moves are quite natural with this one exception. I take, of course, the black, and then they can disrupt my second row a little bit. They take the reds, which is slightly better for them, and I take the blues. And here's what happens. So my tiles are slightly misaligned. They have slightly better adjacency, but I'm way ahead on the bottom two rows, and I have two more tiles placed productively than they do. They lose floor line points, and they have no tiles in their bottom row. So actually I end up having a slight opening advantage here. Yeah, we also have simply more points, and then as a result I ended up just simply accruing this advantage further. So here they did end up spending a lot of effort on completing their bottom row with the whites, which maybe wasn't a necessity necessarily. I think they should have just let me use all the whites, because this run out was actually not that bad for them because there were no blues for me. And what they end up doing essentially is they do miss out on a lot of reds that they could have used in their bottom row, because you see what happens now. They cannot complete their bottom row. They're forced to take the golds for the second. I take away the two whites from them, and then they will need to spend some time with a mismatch row. Here, of course, we go for the greed. The blue we're not going to discard because it fits our row perfectly, and they do get the four reds, which suit them well, but for the wrong row, and it only actually gives them 0 points, essentially a 1-1. So we ended up accumulating this advantage. So fast forward to round 5, and here we are at the moment. I'm 20 points ahead on the scoreboard. However, my opponent has more potential this round. They will complete their bottom column in all likelihood, or they could complete their second column, or their fourth column, I mean. And I have no way of completing my second row, but I figure just because of such a huge advantage on the scoreboard, I should be having enough over here. So what cost my opponent a lot of time is just getting this 1 point with the whites. I understand the idea here because they're using this row defensively in the second and third round, and they were also threatening another column, but it didn't just work out for them. And here, I decided to simply start taking away tiles from my opponent because they needed the blues everywhere, and then just at some point drop 1 blue for the first row and finish the game. So what I'm doing here is simply creating threats. So as you see, now I finish the game, then I sort of make them take the reds with the first player tile. They complete their column finally. I now create another threat for my fourth row, which they end up neutralizing. Well, I do take away 1 blue and they don't get to finish their third row, so I got something. And also they're forced to discard more tiles with the blacks because I was threatening to take 1 point in their third row and, you know, deny them the completion of their top row. But now it's all is a simple sequence, and even though I ended up completing only putting actually only 1 tile on the board productively in the last round, it was more than enough to complete the win. Again, just an example of sort of gradually accumulating the opening advantage, as is something that you've probably seen a lot in this video. So now the semifinals, which is not going to be easy because we're playing another Portuguese player and another subscriber for our channel who knows my tricks, against Rui Costa. So let's see what happens here. I think, yeah, they take the whites, which is quite neat. I'm not sure about placing them in the middle column. I guess I could see how the blacks could converge so that they could get 2 blacks at the bottom. However, in all likelihood, I'm going to take one of the blacks for my top because they have to think how I'm going to oppose them. And if they take the middle column, then they're probably going to need 2 gold over here, leaving 3 golds for me. So I'm very likely to take the 4th column. And then for the 4th column, I'm going to need a black at the top. So it's as simple as that. If I were them, I would probably just actually place the whites maybe for the bottom row and try to go for the 4th column myself, but it's a legit move. Here I decide to, as I said, oppose them. And this is a very creative move from them. I did not quite agree with that. I thought they would be just taking the first player tile, because what happens here is they will be completing their 4th row. However, they are giving me an opportunity to complete the 4th row with the starting player's tile. Now, what they do recognize quite wisely is that these 4 reds are quite far away from where I want them to be. And if I am building the outer column, not the outer column, but column 4, well, then I probably would want to take the 4 reds and put them in my 2nd row, lose some in my floor line. But you know what? Because there's so many tiles here converged, the adjacency doesn't matter anymore that much. And I mean, I'm just going to take the 4th row, because good things can happen later on. Even though it's far away now, because it's so early in the game, we should be able to set up to, you know, accomplish something nice with it. And if not, you know, it's 1 point and it's the first round, the first player tile. Now, the more experienced players of you, just seeing these 4 reds over here, you probably know exactly how the game is going to finish and exactly the win condition that is going to occur. So, but let's watch the rest of the game to see if you were right. I'm not going to show the whole game, but I'm going to show a couple of rounds. So you see, like, lots of very forcing sequence. They take the top. Now we're sort of forced to do this. Now they take, yeah, we had to do this so that they don't complete the 3rd row. They take the 3rd row away from me, but I take the 4th row away from me, from them. And here we go. It's another substitute setup, very common theme. So we actually end up building the 4th column with a substitute 4th row, and it actually works just fine. I do take the top, and what's the result here? So we do end up taking 11 tiles versus 8, that is quite a lot. Definitely they have slightly, well, better adjacency here because my stuff is sort of all over the place. However, there's definitely benefit in that. You see, I have already my objectives for the blues completed pretty much for most of the game. So I only need 4 blues in this setup remaining. And then, they need the blues really bad for their next round. I have the first player tile. I'm likely to take away some blues from them in the 4th row. Let's see if that is what happens. We're gonna gloss over round 2 quite quickly because I think the main idea will be in the 3rd round. Oh no, they're going to be an interesting point in the 2nd round as well. So I'm playing some forcing moves. I decided to finish my bottom row first to force them to do this. So now that I can force more tiles converge, and the idea is I take this further. Now I take the 1 gold here. I still have the other gold left for the top if I want, but now I'm threatening a lot of stuff. I'm threatening, well, the 2 reds are probably not that big of a threat, but I'm threatening the 4 blacks in my 4th row, and because I'm going to free up my 5th row, I could easily pivot to the outer column if there are a lot of golds next round, or the 2nd column if there are lots of reds next round. So probably they have to do something about this, either directly or indirectly. They decide to make the blacks converge even further with the idea of disrupting my 2nd row. And probably what they're thinking now is like, I don't know, I take 2 reds for my 2nd row, and then maybe they take 3 blues for their row over here. I take 1 gold, and they suffer casualties in the floor line. However, I decided to treat this a little bit differently. Let's see what I did here. I did take the 2 reds. I kind of agreed with the idea. Oh, but if they take the 3 blues, then I take the 5 blacks, and then we both end up without the 1st row. So they decide to do this, which I think is extremely greedy. If they want to do this, then I would probably just dump this in the floor line in order not to disrupt their row. And the idea is they're sort of forcing me to take the blacks. To, if I want to complete my 1st row, I get to lose a lot of points in the floor line, and then they get to do the blues. But then I'm not going to do that. It's one of those games where you have to sacrifice your 1st row, and this is what I did. I just decided to complete an early column, sacrifice the 1st row, make them lose points in the floor line. Even though it doesn't matter that much in the 2nd round, they do end up losing quite a bit of points, and I end up leading 4-0. And the early column, in my view, ends up being worth it. Here, I think I've been deliberating for quite a bit. Yeah, I just decided to go for the simpler stuff. Why did it took me so long? Okay, tournament, nervousness. Okay, let's see. They take the whites away from me. They're forcing me to take the whites. Just so that the blacks can converge. But then this allows me to do all kinds of interesting things. And this is where we're going to see the main issue. So I get to quite productively put a gold for 4 points on my top row. And then it's a bit of a problem for my opponent because they want 4 blues on their 4th row, but it's not quite possible to get them because let's say if they start by putting blues here, then I end up taking the blues, and then they end up taking the whites, and then I end up taking the 5 reds. So I have a lot of space here which I can use. They also have some space, but not that much. And what they end up doing essentially is this. But I, of course, will be very happy to take the 5 reds. They're, first of all, threatening to take the 5 reds themselves, and I already have 4, and I'm going to take 5, and I now, as a result of this, am only 4 tiles away from complete color. As you see, there are 4 reds here, but not in the right combination, but still, it gets me closer. Of course, I need to neutralize these blacks first, and I need to place them not in the third, but in the fourth row to keep the third row clean for the reds. And then we'll just see in a second how this round plays itself out. Its natural moves. I get the first player tile. I get to complete every single one of my rows this round. And here, I think they should have taken the 2 reds away from me because the color threat is too severe. But the problem is, you see, it's a double threat, because if I get enough whites, I get this column. Or like if I put the gold here, I get some blacks, I could get another column as well. So like these things, they end up playing, and that square from the first round ends up mattering quite a bit. So I go for the 2 reds, which guarantee me complete color, because I only need 1 more, and well, there's more than 1 remaining. And I even put the golds here, because, well, why would I discard them? They actually will end up probably fitting me as well, because there's some of them remaining. And I decided to just simply force my opponent's hand, take a red, and force my opponent to take a red. However, this is, I think it's a legit move. Like, this is what I mean, I did what I had to do. But my opponent here, I think, missed a chance. Obviously, they're behind. Obviously, I have already completed the color. What they did is they decided, oh, you know, I have only 1 red left, so why don't I complete the first row? But it is a losing game. And this is what they should have done. Okay, so remember how I earlier sacrificed my first row? Which means that I have now only 1 opportunity to complete the game. In order to finish the game, I have to place 2 blacks here. And this is where I think my opponent should have at least tried to compete me for the blacks. Maybe they can take 1 black and then discard the other one into the floor line, because the idea, I need 3 blacks anyway. So if I need 1 black to finish my column, no, that would be too bad not to finish a column, but I also need 2 more to finish the game. And so there are some scenarios, I didn't quite calculate the points, but at least I think they should have tried that. Like, when you're far behind, just like in Carcassonne, you have to really try something desperate, and in this case is prolonging the game to the 6th round. So there are several methods. They could maybe try and make a lot of blacks converge. There's some scenarios, if I'm not careful enough, if I make a mistake, how I get maybe 1 black for my column, but they get 3 blacks for their third row. They get 2 blues over here. I get some stuff in my floor line, and then if a good run out comes for them, then they get to have complete color with black, and I don't know, and like 2 columns with blues and whites or something like this. So another run out, which I think they could have tried, is let's say they take 1 black at some point and put it in their second row, and then they try to utilize the blues before they converge, and they put 3 over here and they put 2 over here, so they end up actually setting themselves up for 2 column. And then the main purpose, if they manage to make it into the 6th round, all they have to hope for is just a lot of reds. Because here's the beauty of Azul, one of the many beauties. In most games that work well, there's one thing in common. They have a mechanism for the player who's behind to get back. Think Catan, there's the robber. Somebody pulls ahead, everybody starts blocking them with the robber. Also, there are other mechanisms such as a limited number of roads, a limited number of cities. So if you're very good at building roads, eventually they're going to run out, and other players will catch up. In Carcassonne, these are field fights. If your opponent gets a lot of monasteries, they get their meeples tangled up, and so you can drop some farmers, and maybe that equalize the game like that. If your opponent completes a big city, maybe if there's like a 30-point field, you can fight for it and overcome your opponent. So there's this mechanism. In Azul, it's simply the space that the leading player will be running out of. Because how do you get a lead in Azul? You complete a lot of squares and you get points. But then you have fewer squares left to complete, so you're more likely to start dropping stuff on your floor. But with the 6th round, a complete color is probably the easiest position to play against, because I would have nowhere to place any more reds. And then if there are a lot of reds that come out, then I am essentially guaranteed to lose 14 points in my floor line. So that's something that they should have tried. And if anything, if you're behind, you need to either find a way to manipulate your opponent into making a mistake, or if it's possible, create an objective threat of actually winning if your opponent chooses to end the game now. So I think they got a little bit impatient starting just playing for points. I believe that all was not lost for them in this game, and indeed I really like the idea of trying to continue it into the 6th round. Because see what happens now. So now actually I just take, I think, 1 black for the column, and I also make all the blues converge because they really wanted this 3+2. Now it's not happening. Now it's just a big 5. And at this point, it doesn't matter who gets the blues. I'm happy to sacrifice my entire floor line just so that they don't get the column. Because if you think about this, the column is worth for them 14 points. It's 5, 2, plus 7 for the column bonus. It's 14. And the maximum I can lose here is 14 as well. But yeah, and now my goal is just to make everything converge. And you will see the position is somewhat ironic. Now they're sort of going for the blacks. Now, of course, I just go for... Not of course. Oh yeah, I decided to go for the golds, and I'm preparing to converge more blacks, essentially. They take 1 more black. I do the standard tactic. And here they decided to take the blues first. I believe they should have taken the whites here, because they take the blues to complete their column. I take the whites, and they take the golds, and their floor line is complete. But now the slight irony of this situation is that I didn't finish the game, they did. So because I saw that they finished the game, now I kind of didn't have to. So I just used the blacks in the most productive place, which is scoring the column. It was like a 9 plus 7 at 16-point move with just 1 tile. You gotta take it. And so I ended up winning the game with a column and complete color. Yeah, so it was a very interesting endgame. Quite an experimental start from my opponent, giving me these 4 reds, but I think still in the opening you gotta avoid your opponent having big tile groups. This brings us to the grand final, where we meet again with the player with the screen named Palmero. We both accrued even more rating, so he just ended up winning everybody over the course of the tournament. He defeated Mad Tucker in the semifinals, but I'm the starting player, and the runout's quite okay. I decided to start building from the bottom row here. You could make an argument for starting with the golds as well. So they probably should be taking the whites. Of course, they're opposing me on a different column. I decided to complete with my plan to build column 4 essentially, because again, still a sufficient number of golds. They continue their stuff. I probably going to go for row 3, and they go for the top. Essentially, we just exchange natural moves. Now I decided, I think, to take the reds. Yeah, because they fit me quite neatly. Then they take the blue or the whites, which is also okay for them. And I take the blue at the top. So I'm actually quite happy with this run out. Not with this run out, but with the setup that I have. I'm essentially building the fourth column. I have 4 tiles at the bottom neatly aligned, and if anything, I'm 1 tile ahead from my opponent. The one thing that I don't have going for me is the whites, because 7 whites have already been used up. Oh, this phrase will matter later in the game about the whites, but you'll see. So it's less likely that there will be an abundance of whites soon enough. But still, it's a decent setup to play. Luckily, there is a lot of whites. So, and a lot of blues. So, like, okay, they also need the blues, but this run was pretty good for me. They take the blues. I also have to take the blues away from them from their third row. The beauty of it, they actually don't need the whites at all now after they've... well, they could use their first row somewhat defensively, but I can just wait. They do take the reds, which I could have used in my third row. Then I think I decide to force things a little bit just to take the blacks. Not sure about that. Maybe I think a better move. Yeah, maybe a better move was to take the 1 black, actually, now that I think about this. Because I would be forcing them to lose more in the floor line. I just saw that I would be having this, and I thought there were scenarios where I would be having the 2... the blues in my third row. But the problem is, I think I could have ended up with golds here instead of blacks for slightly better adjacency bonuses, because now I go here, my opponent very wisely discards the whites. That was actually very smart of them, in order to make sure that I'm not able to complete both rows, only 1. I mean, it's still good position, but you could probably imagine the same setup or a similar setup with basically, here's what could have happened. I could have had 1 black here and 2 gold here. My opponent would have 1 more black in the floor line, and I would have 1 blue here, and they would have 2 blues in the third row. So it possibly seems slightly better, but I didn't see it. Still, the position's pretty good for me, and my idea also was that I have better adjacency bonuses in the third row. I can just build it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like this. Eventually, I'm gonna score a lot of points for this black, like these points for the column. It's not like they're going to disappear anytime soon. I'm ahead 4 points, and I have an early column completed. I mean, the game looks pretty good. Here, this is round 3. I wasn't quite sure about this move. It does feel like it's alright. I mean, it's 2 blacks, 2 blues, and my opponent needs 2 blues, and I'm getting the first round tile, and if my opponent is not careful enough, I can get complete color on the blues. It's not off the table completely. So I do think it is correct, but in hindsight... Well, actually, not just in hindsight. I was concerned in that moment that if I get the first player tile now, this is, I think, round 3, yes, then my opponent will be able to get the first player tile to start round 5, where the first player tile is most important. So now a series of forcing moves follow. We just continue all our blues. I'm quite happy with what's going on, yet my opponent's managing quite good adjacency bonuses here. Because the thing is, I take away some reds for them. I needed the reds here anyway. The blacks can wait. Also, now my opponent is going to have casualties in the floor line because the stuff from his top, it's not working out greatly from him. And now I'm going to make a couple of questionable moves. So they're starting with the reds, as they should. Now they're making me choose if I take the 3 whites here, which is a legit move, but I'm not a huge fan of it, because a lot of whites have already been out. That was my thought then. Then they take the 4 blacks, which is actually not that bad for them. It's really good adjacency. They only lose 4 points in the floor line. And then I probably discard the 2 golds. Another idea that I could have had, and I think I should have gone for it, is just take the 1 point, take the 1 completed square with the blacks, hope for some future adjacency bonuses later. For example, if I get 3 whites in my third row, I could get 1 point extra from the black, and they would play on a very good day with a lot of reds, but still not impossible. I get to threaten another column. So I think I should have just taken the 4 blacks here. Then my opponent would have taken the 3... Well, actually, that's a good question. No, they would have taken the 3 whites. I would have just discarded the 2 golds. But I decided to try and play efficiently. And I placed the blacks in the bottom rows, and I'm threatening a second column. This is, of course, not happening. But my idea was just simply not to lose points in the floor line. And blacks are adjacent, golds are adjacent, so I thought it could work well. And it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, really. So the slight disadvantage of that is after this, I'm going to be needing golds in 2 places. I'm going to be needing golds here, gold here. But I figured it wouldn't be like that much of a problem because there was a large number of golds remaining, but here we are. Where are all the yellows? Come on. But anyway, we don't get to complain about that, of course. We had really good runouts, actually, at the start. So I went for just preserving the points, simply. But now, suddenly, my position doesn't look that great because the blues... I don't have a place to put the blues. That's a bit of a problem. I was kind of just hoping that there wouldn't be enough of those. I have great places for whites, great places for reds, nice places for blacks. So here what happens. I think I take the whites first. Yeah, because I have to finish my first row, my second row, and generally there's a scarcity of whites. And also, it's not like they need gold anyway. They, no matter what we do, they're going to take the first player tile. Then we are in a bit of a predicament because we need to accomplish multiple objectives. I could maybe place some reds here, which is maybe what I should have done. I don't know if I place the reds, but then they, if I do the reds here, they take the 1 black, they finish their third row. And they could actually finish their third and second row as well. I could end up without a black over here. So a lot of not so good things can happen. They actually have a really good position because they need the blacks here, the golds here. For example, they could just simply put the 2 golds at the end of the round here just so that I get stuck with my 4th row. So a lot of good things can happen for them. Now what I did here is I took not 1 but 2 blacks with the idea of making it impossible for them to complete the 3rd row, I believe, and also of grouping the 2 golds and just forcing them into a decision now. The idea was if they take away the 2 golds, then I could take the reds, and I'm a happy person. Obviously, they cannot afford that. They take the reds first from me. Now here, I don't remember what quite I did. I think I may have taken these blacks trying to force my opponent to move some reds. But possibly being patient here and just taking the blacks could have worked out. Just taking the golds could have worked out just fine. What I didn't want to do, what I didn't want to happen is for me to take the golds, my opponent to take the reds and force me into taking the 3 blacks, because they would group all the 3 blacks, they would force 6 points over here in their 3rd row, and then I would have a decision to make. I would probably need to place them in my 3rd row, but then my opponent would take some whites away from me and I would end up with a round without my 1st row. So what I do here is I place a black, just to disrupt the opportunity for them completing the 3rd row, which was sort of my plan all along. Now the problem with this move, it may have been the mistake that cost me the game, or maybe not. You see a lot of whites over here. There are 5, 7, 9, and then 6 over here. So that's 15. Now, I remembered that a couple were discarded last move. Okay, so that's 17. But then I figured that there would be 3 remaining. I would have enough to complete my top row and the game. The problem is I have forgotten about whites that were discarded earlier in the game. Yeah, so sometimes I do that too, which is a bit embarrassing. But basically, that was simply a miscount. Not really a miscount, but just poor tracking on my part. But the problem is, even if I had recognized that there were fewer whites remaining than I thought, I would have to settle for 2 points instead of like 9, and then I would have to postpone getting the 9, well then 10 points later. So in fact, I would have gotten only a couple points more. But possibly this might have been enough to win. But we shall see. So yeah, do I do this? Oh wait, I take the 2. I'm not sure why I did that though. There must have been a reason, right? Maybe I just had to take the 1 there. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why I took the 2. There must have been a reason. Come on, there must have been a reason. Please don't tell me I just did this for no reason. Okay. But yeah, our opponent does the standard tactic, which was pretty much unavoidable. And because of my idea to play efficiently... I see why, okay. Maybe I didn't want them to place the 2 blacks here as well, but I should have let them probably. So the idea was like, I discard, you discard. Then I take the reds here, which is definitely correct, because it's not like I'm going to use the whites here. I know that there's not a high number of whites. I thought there were 3 or maybe 2. Because I will, whatever it is, I will need some over here. So reds go here perfectly. Now they take the whites to avoid floor line loss, and they're threatening a nice adjacency bonus. And I get to lose 6 points in the floor line, which hurt. And it's all because my rows 5 and 4 were occupied. I took a bit of a gamble here. I did get the 4 points from them eventually and avoided previous losses of points in the floor line. But maybe in that 3rd round, just taking 4 blacks to complete this 1 square was the correct play. And as I see this round out, I understand that the gold medal is slipping away from me because there's not 3, not 2, but just 1 white remaining, which I desperately need over here. And, you know, my opponent is not going to miss this. They just take 1 white away from me and win the game. Yeah, I believe here there's really not anything that I can do. I could try force the game into the 6th round, but it's not really possible because my opponent has 2 chances for the blues. And now I thought long how to come up with some sort of master plan to actually still win this game despite my missing 1st row. What I have going for me is that I will have like extra stuff. I will have the red here probably for 6 points. I will have the gold here probably for 1 point more than our opponents because they're probably gonna finish this. I'm gonna finish this, and I could score like a couple points more, and there's a sufficient number of golds for a complete color potentially. Well, we'll see. So, I had several ideas here. One I thought is I could do to my opponent what my opponent did to me. So why don't I, as they took away the white from them, why don't I take the 2 blacks? But the problem is, okay, I take the 2 blacks, then they take 1 black somewhere from here and threaten their 1st row. And then let's say I take 1 more black to take away from them. It's actually quite easy to imagine. Then everything here converges in the center. And if I want to use the golds or the reds, I have to suffer heavy casualties on the floor line. And they still have 2 blues on different plates to finish the game. So it doesn't work quite well. However, the thing what I had missed is the threat for complete color. I saw that threat later, but I could have probably invoked it earlier. So it's actually quite easy to see. So let's say 2 golds go here, and then I have 5 more gold, and I can actually put here. And with complete color, I would be winning this game hands down. Now, one sequence that we could have tried is, let's say we take these blacks, put them here. They take 1 black from somewhere, doesn't matter. Let's say from here, which is actually a better move. Or if they make a mistake and take it from the other plate and sort of bring the blue closer to the center. Then, instead of taking away the black from them, then we take this guy. Then we put it over here, and then as a result, if they take the remaining black and finish the game, I would have 5 golds for my bottom row and for complete color. And this is the sequence that I missed and I should have tried. But that just to show you that even in a hopeless position, there are sometimes tricky threats that you can create. I believe they might have some ways to mitigate against that. For example, they might simply, they actually just might simply take some golds for the 3rd row and try to win without the 2nd row. But then I would be forced to take 1 more black, and they would take a blue and a lot of reds would converge, so I wouldn't be getting this. But that's unfortunate that I missed this idea, because I believe that would have made the path to victory much harder, and the game probably more entertaining to the spectators. So what I did instead, I decided to just make them drop as much stuff on the floor line as I possibly could. So I took yeah, I thought about this. I should have tried that. I took the yellows, after all. Then they finished the game, so that was my idea. Then I take the 1 red, and then I make the 2 converge, so they're forced to lose a couple of points in the floor line. They take this, and yeah, now I sort of saw the threat of complete color. Because the problem with the threatening complete color was to do everything with tempo, right? I have to make sure that my opponent does not just take away the gold from me for the 4th row. So I take 1 gold, which is the best move here, put them in my bottom row, and then it forces my opponent to take the 4 golds, but now they cannot place the 4 golds in their 3rd row because I'm going to leave them with 5 reds, and then they would have nowhere to put the 5 reds because the red is here, and they would be discarding a lot of points. And actually, if they were to do that, they would lose the game, which I was really hoping for. But I mean, come on, they're like rated 840. I mean, of course they're going to make the right move, which is take this, put in the bottom, and then here, of course, I have to take the blacks. Yes, I will be giving them 3 points for the 3rd row, but they are losing 2, so it's net -1 for them. But as you will see, it is not enough, because with that extra row, they win the game by 3 points. I wish I tried that thing with the complete color threat. Wonder how that would have played out. But it is what it is, and credit where credit's due. My opponent played really well throughout the tournament, and they won their gold medal by winning 2 quite close games against me, so congratulations to them. As for me, I'm, to be honest, quite happy with this. I only learned Azul a few months ago, and this is my first major international online tournament. So I'm going to try to go for gold next year, or for the in-person Mind Sports Olympiad that is going to happen in August in London. But so far, I'm quite happy with this. I had some tough draws, one against difficult opponents with a couple points difference. Learned something in the process. Also, in all the games, I didn't feel like I did something royally stupid. Well, yeah, that miscount of with the whites is probably like bad enough, but still, maybe even that wasn't necessarily the game-losing mistake. I feel like in all games, I managed to figure out the opening, to either have a solid opening advantage, or when the run out of tiles was better for my opponents, to equalize. There was no game where I was behind after the first round. I managed to use the fourth row defensively a lot when the runouts were unlucky, so and mitigate for that, and well, play 10 quite interesting games of Azul. Alright, I really hope this video was under an hour, but I feel like it wasn't. In any case, there was a lot to go through, and I hope you found this interesting or learned something. So first of all, if you have questions, or if you found alternative moves for me or for my opponent that I did not see, please do let me know in the comments. I'm all looking forward for analyses. But just, you see, the sheer complexity of the situation shows how much potential this game has to grow, because even at the top competitive level, like, the game is absolutely not solved, except for maybe the opening, which most of the time should be clear how to play, and several more things. If you have other games from the Mind Sports Olympiad which do not involve me, which you'd like to see analyzed, for example, I didn't look at the bronze game match yet, do let me know, and let me know who the players were. Also, if you enjoy seeing content like this channel is mostly devoted to competitive Carcassonne, but I do Azul videos regularly, at least once a month or so, sometimes more often. So do subscribe if you intend on seeing this content more than once. And also, if you found out about this channel because of Azul, then I would encourage you to also try competitive Carcassonne, because these two games have a lot in common, and in fact having like played Carcassonne has helped me with my Azul a lot. I cannot say the opposite, because I've lost my shape in Carcassonne a little bit because of playing too much Azul. But I'm pretty sure that you're quite likely to find this interesting. And of course, place a tile on the like button. I don't know how to say that. I would normally say meeple the like button because, you know, it's Carcassonne. I don't have an Azul equivalent, but yeah, the like button, the subscription, it helps with the algorithm so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you soon.